I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 311. And today in the show, we're going to be talking about pre-rut hunting strategies, and then we're joined by two new hunters to discuss some close buck encounters and our recent mentored hunt in Michigan. Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Onyx. Today we've got a fun show. We've got an interesting show, couple different things we're going to be covering. Joining me here shortly is Josh Furter-Hilliard and two new hunters, Dan Jajo and Mike Romine, who joined us recently for a Field to Fork event here in Michigan. Now, this is a program ran, in this case, jointly by the Quality Deer Management Association and Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, in which we trained up 8 new hunters and paired them with mentors for a weekend of hunting and camaraderie. And I was privileged to get to be one of those mentors. So today we're going to recap that event and hear from Mike and Dan about, what brought them to hunting, what brought them to this event, the challenges they've faced trying to learn how to do this whole thing, and what this whole experience they had this past weekend meant to them, and how it hopefully helped arm them for the future. And I just got to tell you, at least for me, the experience was awesome. And I'm going to be doubling down on doing this kind of thing and trying to help mentor more people, because I just can't tell you how much fun it was to share my love of hunting with someone who was actively interested in learning, like craving a learning opportunity and just not having anyone else to go to. It was great. It was very fulfilling, and it's a need. There's a lot of people out there who want to learn, who don't have a friend or a family member or a place or a resource to help get started. So I hope coming out of this, you will, I think after you hear from these two guys who both had really cool close encounters, I think once you hear their raw emotion from these experiences, it just brought me back to my early days, and I loved it. So that's what we're going to chat about here in a second. But before we get to all that, I do want to make sure we talk some deer hunting strategy, because when this podcast drops, if you're listening to it on the day it comes out, that's October 24th, 2019. And that's basically what I consider the beginning of the pre-rut for most parts of the country. That means things are going to be getting real good here soon. So I want to make sure I'm arming you all with at least a few ideas or reminders as we head into these important hunting dates. So I thought I would give you kind of a real quick Cliff Notes set of advice to keep in mind. Kind of a compilation of high-level pointers that I picked up over my years hunting, or from the many conversations we've had with so many great hunters on this podcast. So, if you listen to the podcast all the time, this isn't brand new stuff. This is reminders, but hopefully we can put it together in a succinct way here to make sure we're thinking about the right things as we get into we're really approaching it, the Super Bowl, the whitetail season. I mean, it's getting good. So, some quick ideas to keep in mind. Number 1, this upcoming time frame, let's say October 24th through the 31st or so, Halloween time frame, This can be one of the absolute best times of year to kill an old mature buck that's local to your property. If you've got a homebody buck, a deer that maybe you've seen a bunch, or he spends a lot of time in your farm, or maybe it's a deer that you're always getting on camera all over the place, but it's always after dark, this is possibly your best chance to kill him. Because in the coming days, testosterone levels are really going to be getting high for your local bucks, and they're going to be feeling real frisky. But the does probably won't be ready to breed yet, at least not in any kind of really high numbers. So what you're looking at and what you're going to have is a mature buck that wants to get on his feet a little bit earlier than usual to scope out does, but he's not going to be going full bore yet. He's not going to be cruising all over the country. He's going to be sticking close to his local stomping grounds. And if you know what the buck's usual routine is, or at least know some of the key stopping points along the way, you can really take advantage of that knowledge right now and catch him when he's just a little bit more vulnerable. But if we wait, and if you're not doing this, if you're not getting after it right now, if you fast forward 2 weeks and we're into November, man, all bets might be off. I mean, that buck could be chasing does all over the place. He could take a mile sojourn in a new direction and maybe never makes it back. You just can't predict what these deer will do with much certainty once the rut gets cranking. So the point of all this is to say that if you have a homebody buck right now and you've got him nailed down, if you know where he's bedded, or if you know where he's feeding after dark, or some kind of intel like that, this is a really good time to get aggressive. So if the conditions are right, get after him hard. But remember, you still want to hunt this deer on October patterns. So you want to be intercepting him going to his bed or leaving it, or heading out to feed. You're not going to be shifting into those full bore rut strategies yet. Now, number 2, speaking of conditions being right, at this time of year, if you get a good cold front pushing through, it is game time. I mean, cold fronts are exciting any time of year, but it just seems like a big cold front in late October just takes things to a whole different level. If I'm seeing a front hitting during that last week of the month or so, I'm looking at that as just as good as anything happening in November. I mean, I'm canceling work. I'm rushing to get all my chores done, putting the out of office email up, turning off my phone. I'm getting in a tree no matter what. You just got to be out for those days and aggressive, because you can definitely get it done. So keep that in mind. Number 3, as we're trying to build the strategy further, we're looking at the conditions. Yes, conditions are good. The time of year is good. That buck's going to be a little bit more vulnerable. Now, number 3, look back on trail camera pictures from prior years to help predict what's going to happen over the next few days. If there's a buck that you're after this year and you've had pictures of him from previous years, you've got a hugely important tool at your disposal. Use those pictures to inform your future strategy. They don't just tell you what he did, they can also help tell you what he's going to do. Bucks oftentimes have kind of an annual pattern in which they'll start visiting the same general areas at the same time each year, or they'll start moving in daylight right around the same time each year. It's not a hard and fast rule, but oftentimes we see this trend. So look for that and use it to predict when and where to hunt that buck over these final October days, because things are going to get wonky soon. So use that past intel to tell you, okay, maybe you can look back at all the pictures of your big 8-pointer. And the big 8-pointer, maybe last year, the first daylight pictures of him were October 27th. And the year before that, the first daylight pictures were October 25th. If you see that, man, you sure as heck better be in a tree during that time period this week if everything lines up. So look at that stuff. Think about that stuff. Number 4, another thing to think about at this time of year as we're transitioning is that calling can start working very well, right? Everything's ramping up. Testosterone's rising. Females are edging closer and closer to being an estrus. Tensions are just really high in the woods. So if you see a buck out of range, it's definitely time to consider making some noise. Now, I personally like to start with something light, like a little contact grunt, just a little brah, just to try and get a buck's attention to see if I can get him curious. Now, if that doesn't work and if his body language seems okay, he's not getting spooky, next I might try a snort wheeze. Now, this is a really aggressive call. It sounds like this. That's basically like walking into a bar, pushing a guy in the back and flipping him the bird. I mean, it's fighting. If it's a real big old buck, he's probably, or at least hopefully, going to come in for a fight. But if it's a wimpy little guy or a little buck, he's probably going to tuck tail and run. So make sure you keep in mind that's not something to do if you're trying to call in a 1.5-year-old buck. Now, finally, it also might be worth trying to rattle, smashing antlers together to simulate a fight. But I do think this really depends a lot on where you hunt. Here in Michigan, there's a ton of hunters, and there's relatively few mature bucks compared to other places. So here, I don't like to rattle very much at all, especially not early. But if you're in a state like Kansas or Nebraska or Iowa, one of these states where there's fewer hunters but many more mature bucks, you definitely can try cracking the antlers because, man, there's no doubt there are a lot of real fights happening at this point. Now, the biggest thing to keep in mind, if you're going to do this, if you're going to try some kind of calling, whether it's rattling, grunting, whatever, doe bleats, bucks almost always want to approach a sound they hear, a call, from the downwind side. If it's possible, they're going to try to circle downwind of you. So be really careful about that when you choose to call. If you've got a buck that is close to being downwind of you, but not quite there and isn't walking in that direction, if you grunt, all of a sudden you are going to trigger him to turn and get downwind of you. You're going to force him to get downwind of you, and he's going to wind you and run away. So don't call in that situation. So either try to call when he's way upwind of you, or if you have some kind of barrier behind you that's going to keep him, keep him from winding you. Maybe that's a river or some nasty tangle that a buck's just not going to be able to get through. Make sure you're thinking about that wind. Number 5, if you're ever wanting to use scrapes within your hunting strategy, now is the time. Research has shown that buck visitation to scrapes peaks in late October. So if you're new to hunting and you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, basically scrapes are these big kicked up patches of dirt that you're going to find out in the woods, maybe the size of, like a computer desk kicked up. You're going to see this big patch of dirt, and there's going to be a branch hanging over top of it. This is where a buck will come in. He's going to kick that up. He's going to make that sign. He's going to take a leak. He's going to pee in that dirt. He's going to rub his head on that overhanging branch. He's going to deposit a bunch of scent. He's essentially leaving a message for other deer. And now oftentimes these visits, they're happening after dark. But at this time of year, late October, that's been shown to be the top time for them to be visiting the scrapes, and it's probably your best opportunity to catch one of those visits during daylight. So especially if you find a fresh scrape that's way back in the cover, it's in some thick stuff, it's in the timber, that can be a dynamite location. I personally don't set up very often just to hunt a specific scrape, but what happens for me a lot is I'm in an area for another reason. Maybe I know this is a transition between bedding and feeding. I've got pictures of a deer stepping out of this piece of timber, whatever it might be. If I'm in a zone of interest and I'm trying to find the spot within the spot, that's where a scrape comes in really helpful. If I can find that scrape, that helps me zero in on the specific location that I want to be within range of. So keep that in mind. Finally, number 6, when you're heading out for your next hunt or your next couple hunts here, hopefully this week sometime or this weekend, I want you to head into the field thinking and believing that you're going to send an arrow. Think through your plan. Set up with attention to detail. Don't just go out to a random spot for shits and giggles. Really try to think it through. Think about, what's the wind doing? Where do I think the deer are bedded? Where do I think the deer are going to go feed? What do I know from previous sightings? What do my cameras tell me? What do the conditions make me think is going to happen tonight? Think through all that. Look at all the data. Put together a well-informed, confident hunt. A few well-planned hunts like this are just worth so much more than a whole bunch of willy-nilly hunts. And when you do head in for a hunt with this kind of background and preparation in place, you're going to have this sense of confidence and anticipation that's both really exciting and really helpful. Because when you go in with a solid plan and that confidence, you get this, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy effect. You're going to walk in just a little bit slower and a little bit more quietly to your stand. You're going to be just a little bit more careful moving in the tree stand. You're going to scan with your binoculars just a little bit more. Your senses are just going to be cranked, and you're going to be mentally ready for whatever steps out. And that mental readiness, that can absolutely make or break your hunt. So get out there over these coming days. Be confident, be prepared, and have fun. I mean, this is what we've waited all year for. This is it. And I, for one, am stoked. So with all that said, the rest of our conversation today, it's about introducing other people to this thing we just talked about. I mean, how lucky are you and I that we get to hunt and enjoy experiences like this and geek out over late October strategy and dream about November? I mean, this is living. But a lot of people never get introduced to it, or they're intrigued, they're interested, but they don't know how to get started. They don't know how to do it on their own. That's where mentoring comes in. And I think and I hope that after hearing about this mentor hunt experience that I just had and that these guys just had, and hearing how impactful it was for these new hunters, I think maybe a few more of you will hopefully be as energized as I am to keep introducing more and more people to this crazy thing we love so much. So that's the game plan. I'm thinking we take a very quick break here, and then we're going to get right into it. All right, here with me now, I have the infamous Josh Furter Hilliard. I have Dan Jajo, and I have Mike Romine. Thank you guys all for hopping on to do this chat after we just spent so much time together over the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yep, definitely. Thank you.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I mean, this whole experience we just had, at least for me, was a whole lot of fun, but I like getting to have this kind of debrief opportunity. Like, we just had an experience over the last 3 days, and it's easy to sometimes just get caught up in life and just running forward to whatever the next thing is. And having this podcast afterwards, at least for me, has given me a nice opportunity to kind of reflect back on it and think about, okay, why was that such a cool thing? Why would I want to do that again? What did I learn? What could I have done better as a mentor? So I've had an opportunity to do that. And maybe this will give each one of you a little bit of an opportunity to do that too. And hoping maybe folks listening will either learn something or be inspired or get intrigued by what we have to say. So I think where we need to start then, Josh, is a quick cliff notes on what this whole thing is. Because just before this, I introduced the basic concept, but we need to hear from you on what Field to Fork is. We had a podcast all about this earlier in the year. There's an episode on Meat Eater where we did a great job explaining this, but for those that haven't heard those, what was this thing that just happened over the weekend?
Yeah, so this was actually a joint event this weekend with Michigan chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and then Quality Deer Management Association. And it was our Field to Fork program. And BHA has a similar program called Hunting for Sustainability. Very similar programs. I'll talk about like our Field to Fork program though. It's basically what it was modeled after. So we started this program a few years ago now down at our national headquarters just outside of Athens, Georgia, where Hank Forrester, who's our hunting heritage programs manager, and one of his colleagues, Charles Evans, got together and this program had been out there and they said, hey, I think we can kind of take this to the next level. So their plan was to go to farmers markets and try to hand out venison samples and then kind of use that as a lead into asking people if they would ever consider hunting or be interested in learning how to hunt. And then they would take these people that they signed up at the farmers market and they'd put them through training about deer behavior and the biology and shot placement and ethics and hunting 101 stuff, just trying to give them a good baseline knowledge of what they're getting themselves into. And they spend a lot of time at the archery range. For this particular program, most people are using crossbows, just from a proficiency standpoint. And then they'd take them out on a hunt at some property that we have at our national headquarters. And it was a program that was targeted at adults who are interested in sourcing, their own protein or their own local, source of food. And we kind of thought, what better way or what better resources out there than a lot of these deer in people's backyards for, people to have a sustainable source of protein. And it was really a big hit. It kind of just took off right away. We had waiting lists for the events that we were putting on in Georgia, and we really piloted it down there for a year or two. And we're starting to expand it out across the country now, in states where we have branches and a good QDMA volunteer base in certain states. And I think this year we're going to have between 20 and 25 of these Field to Fork events across 12 states. And again, it's an adult focused program where we're focusing on adults who can then go out and replicate this type of hunt on their own, without somebody taking them, or without needing to call someone for a ride, or who may have disposable income where they can go purchase gear, etc. So that's kind of a really high level overview of it. Is that good for this discussion, Mark? You want me to go into a little bit more detail?
No, I think that's perfect. So essentially what we have here is you and your partner over at BHA helped set up a version of that kind of event here in Michigan, where we had 8 hunters and 8 mentors, I think was the number, right, Josh? And we did that. Yeah, pretty cool situation, rented some cabins in a local state park, I guess you would call it, and a bunch of public land all around there. And we were all able to get together for the weekend of hunting and camaraderie and all that kind of stuff. And 2 of the hunters that were there were Mike and Dan. So for you two, what I wanted to hear to start is a little bit of your background, because you both have different situations, different circumstances that led you to meeting us this weekend. So I kind of want to just dive into that a little bit, because I think it's an interesting thing for us experienced hunters to be reminded of, how other people might, be looking at hunting, how other people might be intrigued by hunting, but not knowing where to go to figure out how to do it. Dan, do you want to kind of give us a little bit of your background, how you developed an interest in hunting, what the things were, what other outdoor activities maybe brought you into this kind of world and all that?
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in southeastern Michigan. I guess you could call it the metropolitan Detroit area. Not really coming from a hunting family, not really having any peers or friends that really got into hunting at an early age. But what I did have was some brothers that got me into fishing. So I was kind of always into fishing. And then as I got older, I started kind of expanding my interest in the outdoors to, mountain biking, backpacking, hiking. So kind of developed that interest early on of just being outside and exploring nature. But I always had a curiosity around, the hunting realm of things, and always thought it was something I could see myself getting into, but didn't necessarily have any avenues to really pursue it with elders that could show me the ropes, or friends' parents that could take me along. I guess fast forward to college, I had dated a girl that her family had some property in northern Michigan, and lucky enough to have her dad take me out on a couple hunts, which I thought was super cool and super interesting, and immediately, started to develop that interest of, really seeing myself doing this in the future. Kind of around that same time, I kind of fell into inheriting a bow from a brother's friend. And right there, I started shooting it and having some fun with it, and kind of saw it as a tool to maybe enable myself to, maybe pursue hunting and at a later point in time. Graduated college, long story short, didn't end up with that girl. So couldn't really pursue that avenue for hunting. Moved to Chicago, kind of got away from all my outdoor activities that I did for a little bit. Couple years later, actually moved back to Michigan and kind of picked up where I left off with fishing and hiking and backpacking. So, that kind of started to develop my interest back into, shooting my bow again and maybe seeing if I could pursue hunting again. I think it was one weekend I came across the Meat Eater show on Netflix, and I think I binge watched all the season in like a weekend. So that kind of inspired me right there to maybe really take it seriously. With that, I also ran into your podcast, Mark. So I thought that was a cool resource to maybe learn a few things about, some things in my area, being that you're a whitetail hunter, you're from Michigan, and maybe pick up on some things there. But what I found was I was getting really excited when I listened to your stuff, but I was also getting really frustrated at the same time because it just made me realize that my situation was super difficult to maybe have a friend tag along or maybe run this question I had by, an older, more experienced person than I was in the whole hunting realm. So, kind of stuck with it, kept shooting my bow. And then I think it was probably a month ago, I ran into that Meat Eater podcast that I think you had mentioned earlier, and they were talking about the Field and Fork program. And I said, well, this could be a cool opportunity for me to maybe learn some things, maybe meet some new people. Got on the website. I had emailed Hank Forrester, and he passed my contact information along to Josh. And, I talked to Josh a little bit. Josh told me he had a couple opportunities, and, I figured I'd take him up on it, kind of get out of my comfort zone and maybe, spend a weekend trying to learn and absorb as much as possible. And, that's kind of what led me to this weekend and meeting you guys and having some cool experiences and definitely some cool memories.
And now you're on the podcast itself.
Hey, there you go, man. Funny how things work out.
It is. So what about you, Mike? I know you've got a pretty different set of circumstances than that, but you still ended up in the same place. Give us your story.
Yeah, my background is basically the opposite of his, interestingly enough. So I grew up in a totally hunting family and big-time fishermen. I mean, we were outside all the time, and I grew up hunting rabbits and squirrels and trapping stuff and, all kinds of stuff, a lot of gun sport, all that kind of stuff. But long story short, I took on a career as a professional chef and later a restaurateur and, nights and weekends work, 80, 90 hours a week. And basically, living the life of a restaurateur doesn't leave you a lot of opportunity to get up at 4:00 in the morning because you just went to bed at 2. And so it's a tough thing to be able to fit that time in, I guess, while you're in that mode. So here I am, 15 years later, and my life is a little bit different. And now I'm kind of saying to myself, let me work to live instead of live to work, and let me make some time to get back to the things that I love. And one of the things that really interested me about this program is that when I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of what I would call technical training from my dad. He took us out there, but, I had my 2 brothers and myself, so he was trying to show us all at the same time. And it was more like, here's a spot in a bucket, sit on it and wait for a deer to come by kind of training.
Yeah.
And so I was looking forward to that one-on-one kind of, thoughts about, how do the deer live? How do they move? Why do they move? How do I choose a good spot to hunt? How do I be a more technically advanced hunter as opposed to, throw a bag of corn out there and wait for them to come by? Mm-hmm. I know we can't throw corn out there now, right. But, when I was growing up, that's how it was. So that's kind of my story. And, it was an awesome opportunity to get back to my roots and to learn and to just, I'll never give up a good opportunity for a weekend in a cabin. So it was an awesome experience.
Yeah. Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land? Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Yeah, it's really cool because one of you came from a hunting background, one of you came from no hunting background, but the end result was that neither one of you was a hunter, right? Mike, you had an opportunity early on, and just, there wasn't the experience and someone to help teach you along the way, and so you kind of fell away from it. Career got in the way, and then still no outlet to then learn how to get back into it. And then with Dan, increasing interest in the outdoors, and then an intrigue in hunting, but no way to really get any hands-on experience, no one to show you what's what. So the point being, I think, for me at least, when I got to meet you guys and hear your stories and hear the stories from all the other hunters there in camp, was there's all these different backgrounds that people come from, and there's all these different challenges that might keep them from being interested in hunting to actually becoming a hunter. Like that jump from interested to actually being a hunter is a big one, and there's a bunch of obstacles in the way. This isn't like, this isn't like getting into fantasy football, right? I mean, if you're interested in fantasy football, you can go online, read a couple articles, watch a YouTube video, and basically know how to do it, how to get involved, sign up for a league. You don't need to have friends that are into it. You don't need to have anybody who can share with you anything. You can just sign up and do it, and you've got a whole new hobby, and there you go. You're a fantasy football person. If you develop an interest in hunting just from watching Meat Eater or having some family that used to do it, but now you don't know how to get back into it. If you're in that situation, how the heck do you get going? There's so much gear you need. There's the challenge of trying to find a place to go. There's the challenge you brought up, Mike, which is even if you've been out there before, if no one's actually showed you and shared with you the details of what you're trying to do and how to do it, that's a frustrating situation too. So I think it's really easy for people like me or Josh who have been hunting for a long time to take all that for granted, which is why, at least for me, this weekend was a really important reminder that, it's not a given. It's not easy for someone to get into it. Now you kind of both alluded to a couple of these things, but especially maybe Dan, or both of you really, can you elaborate a little bit on what some of those frustrations were? Like you said, it was frustrating, Dan, when you developed this interest in hunting. Like you started listening to the Wired Hunt podcast a little bit, but then it was frustrating. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit? Like these things I just mentioned, is that basically the gist of how you were feeling, or what was it that was making it hard for you to take that next leap and actually get out there in the woods doing this?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, some of the frustrations I had, you spoke on it a little bit, Mark, was, knowing what gear to get into, right? I mean, you look at the market and there's a ton of different things you can spend your money on, from tree stands to jackets to, archery equipment, calls. I mean, you name it. So, when people would talk about, well, I got this tree stand that helps me do this, I don't really know what exactly they're talking about. I don't have a friend that maybe has this type of tree stand versus a ladder stand that I could ask, well, what do you think is better? What would you think would be more applicable to my certain situation where I'm hunting state land versus private land? Some of those frustrations that I couldn't just readily reach out to somebody and ask. There was that aspect of it. There was the whole strategy aspect of it, to where, some of the podcast would talk about, a certain wind direction that you would need to be cognizant of to different food sources that you would need to pay attention for, and getting out there and trying to find and locate and identify those things was certainly something that I could probably go do by myself, but it would almost be like a guessing game out in the field where I'd point out, okay, well, this is an acorn tree, and then, you know, I can see, I think what looks like maybe is a rub. I'm not really sure. So, you know, I can pull up a Google image of what that might look like, but, you know, at the end of the day, I'm going to always question myself to definitely say, like, you know, I think I saw one, but not totally sure if I really did. So yeah. I found myself like just super frustrated with that kind of situation that, you know, I just, you know, wanted to do something about it. And luckily, you know, I got involved with a great program and was fortunate to have like a great mentor take me out and point out all those specific things and say, you know, this is the rub, this is the scrape, this is the wind direction that we're dealing with. We're going to approach this strategy this way. I just thought was just invaluable to me. You know, something that I didn't have before that kind of opened up my whole perspective of, okay, this is what I need to do now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's a great observation. You know, something else that I think it was Nick, one of the other mentees, had brought up when we were all chatting over the weekend. He said that one of the big things that had kind of been intimidating to him as he decided he wanted to get into hunting, but was kind of worried about, was the whole dealing with the deer after you shoot it. Like the whole idea of like, okay, now I just shot this deer. What the heck do I do? I mean, you can watch a YouTube video, you can see it on Meat Eater, you can read an article about it, but it's very different there in person. Is that something that kind of weighed in the back of your conscience too? Did you ever look at that and say, gosh, how the heck am I going to handle that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, staring at an animal that I just shot and thinking, okay, I know I need to do something with this, not exactly sure what. And then the fear of messing something up and having, you know, things go wrong. And, you know, that just was a total unknown to me. And unfortunately, we didn't tag anything this weekend, but I mean, having somebody there to kind of help you out and walk you through the whole process is, I think, so important to learning your way and figuring out how to do things the right way.
Yeah. Mike, was there anything else for you that stood as a challenge for you to get back into hunting, or anything that you were getting frustrated with, or something that eventually led you to the point where you thought, you know what, damn it, I gotta find someone who's going to help me, and that led you to this program?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting because I really have all the equipment that I need, and I have all the stuff that I need, and I even have some of the background, I guess, at least to do the type of hunting that I was familiar with from before. However, when I came across this program, it was just like, man, I really need to do that. I need to get out there and I need to learn a little bit more. And it's just like how sometimes in life you just kind of get stuck in a rut where you have things that you want to do, but you just don't necessarily know how to get up and running. And sometimes all you need is just that little bit of a jump start that gets you moving. And I think one of the things for me that was really important was that I have these places that are kind of near where I live that I've hunted before. And I feel like at any point in time, I could get up and go there and hunt those places because I've done it before, because somebody set me up there, because I knew what to do. But right here in my backyard, less than 10 minutes from my house, I have a huge piece of state land that I could hunt at any time. But how do I do that? How do I go in there? Where do I look to find the best spot? It was like, how do I get started doing that? I don't really want to drive 2 hours to and from where I'm going to hunt. So that to me was really pretty important. And just to tag a little bit onto what Dan was saying, what you guys were talking about with dealing with the deer afterwards. Interestingly enough, my job, I'm a professional butcher. We own a butcher shop. I still get calls every season from people that are experienced deer hunters that still aren't super comfortable with how to deal with it afterwards. So I think it's important to note that the network that's built from this event is also really important.
Yeah.
Just to have someone that you can, shoot a text to or send a picture to and kind of come back and say, hey, does this look right? Just that reassurance, I think, is pretty powerful.
Very, very true. I think that ultimately, that might be the greatest win out of this whole thing. Like, it was a great weekend, but hopefully the final outcome is long-term relationships between all the different mentors and the different mentees, and the fact that, yeah, like if you, Mike, or Dan, or any of the other folks have a question, or you hit a deer and you need help tracking it or anything like that, you now have people you can call. You now have folks who can help you or can chat on the phone with you and walk you through things. And that's probably harder to come by than we realize, especially if you're in a situation where you're not around a bunch of other hunters. Like if you live in Metro Detroit and you're not from a hunting background, I'm guessing, Dan, you don't have a whole bunch of buddies that are hunting that could help you do this kind of stuff, right? Based off what you're saying.
No, not necessarily. Exactly.
So whether you're in that case with no hunting family or friends, or in Mike's case where you had that background, but you just need someone to actually show you how to do it on your own and not just to sit there and do what Dad said, that's why I think this is pretty cool. So let's get into what happened over the weekend. So you guys found the program, you signed up for it. We all got together Friday night at these cabins that Josh had rented. I'll give like a really quick rundown of the basic situation, and then any one of you guys can jump in here and provide more detail or something. But basically, we had these cabins for the weekend. Friday night, we all got together and just, have some beverages, talk, just tell our stories, introduce each other, just get to know each other. And then we cooked a bunch of wild game. We had, oh gosh, what all did we have? Someone made venison shank. Someone made a pheasant stew, I think. I made some heart.
Some squirrel.
Yeah, maybe it was a squirrel stew.
I think a squirrel stew, like a venison tortellini, some venison summer sausage. Yeah, we had all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
The goal is to have kind of like each mentor bring like a little dish to pass, and preferably wild game. And I think it was all wild game that night, I think.
Yeah. Now, Mike, I know you'd had venison in the past, but Dan, had you had venison before that?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
A few times just through, my friend's parents that had me up north and presented that. Yep.
Now, have you ever had venison heart?
No, I think I missed that this weekend.
Oh, you didn't even get it this weekend? So. Oh, man.
No, I missed that part. Man. That's all right.
Yeah, you missed out because it was damn good. It was really good.
I'm sure. I had some of the back traps, though, so that definitely could say that was pretty good.
That's good. I'm going to take your comment, Mike, and hold that close because you're being a professional chef. I'm quite proud that a professional chef thought my heart turned out well.
Yeah, it was honestly super great. I was impressed by all the food that was there that night. I've had a lot of wild game, and that may or may not always be good, but this group had a really nice output.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, the pressure was on. You don't want to cook something up for new hunters and then make it terrible, and they're like, "Oh, what the heck am I here for?"
Yeah,
and especially one of those new hunters is a professional chef.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it all turned out pretty good, and we had a bonfire, and everyone just hung out, had a good time that night, and almost everyone stayed at the cabins overnight. So we had very full bunkhouse of dudes and a lesser full cabin of quite a few, I guess. It was, I don't know. What was the split, Josh? There was 6 women and 12 guys?
Yeah, we had
something like that?
We had 5 guys and 3 gals of the hunters. And then we had each of them paired with a mentor of the same sex. So I guess we had 10 guys and what would that have been? Six ladies. Women. So I think 9 guys were at the cabin and 5 ladies were in the women's cabin.
Yeah,
so they had a lot more room to spread out.
They did. You and me had to share a futon. Bunch of folks in bunk beds. But I gotta say, for taking that many different people who almost everyone hadn't met before, and everyone bunking up and hanging out for 3 days. I feel like it went surprisingly well. Like everyone got along. It seemed like everyone was really included in conversations and having a good time. I don't know. How did you guys feel, Mike, Dan? Did you feel comfortable pretty quickly? Was it really awkward? I mean, how did it feel?
Oh, I thought it was great. I mean, it's just like takes me back to deer camp, my childhood memories. So everyone's there for the same purpose. Everyone's there to teach and be taught. And it was an awesome group.
Yeah. What did you think, Dan?
Yeah, no, I thought it was great. I think that first night it came in a little late, and I told you guys straight up, like, definitely out of my comfort zone a little bit. I'm just about to spend a couple nights with a bunch of dudes I've never met before. But it turned out really well. I mean, we all gathered with a common interest in mind. And, I think all the conversations that we had and all the things that we did was just a ton of fun. So I think it worked out perfectly.
Yeah, that's definitely how I was feeling too. It was just fun. I mean, it was legitimately fun, which is a nice thing. And the next morning, though, unfortunately, we had to wake up very early, which I hate those early mornings. That's the only thing I don't like about hunting is waking up early. But we did. We got up early. We went out and hunted, and I'll kind of fast forward through most of the hunt. I want to kind of zero in on your guys' specific experiences, but we were hunting public land. Everyone was spread out different places. Almost nobody had hunted here before, so we were all kind of trying to figure out stuff as we went. And we all had our own challenges, I guess. Like that first morning, me and Mike, we headed out, tried to get in one place. It was too wet and flooded, so we had to go to another spot, had to come from a different route that I didn't really like, and we got in there late, didn't see anything. And that first morning, I don't think did anyone see any deer the first morning, or were there a few does sighted off in the distance? Do you remember?
I think there was a few does that were sighted. Had a couple people bump deer, I think, on the way in. But yeah, no like real close calls or anything that first morning.
Yeah.
It was a little hectic though. I mean, we had people getting ground blinds set up in the dark and all that kind of stuff. So it definitely wasn't an ideal morning.
Yeah. You know what you should mention, Josh? Explain also like the gear situation. Like you guys have all sorts of gear for people, right?
Yeah. So this is kind of where like a lot of the partnerships of the other organizations come into play. At least here in Michigan, we're very fortunate. We have a couple of trailers that have been kind of purchased by different organizations, Michigan United Conservation Clubs, NWTF or National Wild Turkey Federation, Pheasants Forever, and Michigan DNR has this Learn to Hunt program. So we've got a couple of trailers that through Pittman Robertson dollars and grants and stuff like that, we've been able to stock these trailers with crossbows and ground blinds and camo, and really anything that a new hunter would need to go through a program like this, whether it be deer or they use those trailers for turkey hunts or pheasant hunts. They do learn to hunt small game. So we've got all the tools that these people need. They just really need to show up with some, if it was pretty cold this weekend, so some like cold gear, keep their hands and feet warm, things like that. We've got basically everything else for these new hunters to use.
Yeah.
So we're fortunate here. That's not available everywhere. That's just through some partnerships that we've made here in Michigan and organizations working together for the same efforts.
Yeah, that was really nice to have. So nobody had to worry about, if you didn't have a bow or if you didn't have a crossbow, you could still participate. If you didn't have camouflage, you could still participate. If you didn't have whatever, we had you covered. That was great. Now, Dan, you brought your own crossbow and you got to at least consider using it on that night's hunt. Walk me through your second hunt of the weekend. You were with Jason Meekoff from Backcountry Hunters and Anglers was your mentor. Walk me through that night. You guys headed in and had a pretty exciting hunt, right?
Yeah, no, it was awesome. So like you said, I had the opportunity of bringing my own compound bow, and I wanted to make sure, Josh and Jason were comfortable with me using it before I went out in the field and tried to shoot something with it. But it was a cool opportunity for me to use what I've been practicing on a real life experience like this. So Jason took me out. First thing he told me, he said, "Hey, I've never hunted this spot before, but I think it looks pretty good." And I told him, "Hey, my trust is in your hands. So we went out, got set up in what looked like a really good spot with a lot of deer sign. Got on the ground. I had all my gear ready to go. Josh had lent me a really awesome jacket that I took out in the field with me that had a built-in face mask. And I was using it to cover up my face to give me a little extra camouflage. But what I found was, as I was breathing through the face mask, my glasses would fog up. So I figured, well, hey, I can't really see anything, so I'll take my glasses off. Fast forward to about maybe 6:30 that night.
Can I put you on pause real quick? I gotta ask you one thing before we get to what you're about to tell us about. Just describe for me how you felt. And maybe this is in the morning, but just describe to me what was going through your mind when you got out for your first hunt. So maybe this is in the morning when you went out, you didn't go out in the morning because you were shooting your bow and stuff like that in the morning.
Exactly.
Yeah. So this was your first hunt with Jason in the evening. Okay.
Yeah.
So you sit down, you're settled, it gets quiet. Where's your head at? Are you just like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening? Or are you, holy crap, I'm nervous? What if a deer shows up? Like, what are you thinking at this point?
So first thought is, it's definitely a little cold. But I mean, I was just excited, and it was just kind of the realm of the unknown at that point. Right. So, what am I expecting? What should I look out for? I mean, my brain kind of turned off, to only really focus on the matter at hand was, let's see some deer. So it was a mixture of a lot of different emotions between, not knowing what to expect to, okay, if I see a deer, what do I do? Making sure I stay cool, calm, and collected. So it was a mixture of a lot of different things.
Yeah. Okay. So now with that in mind, now we know what your mindset was. Now you got fogged up glasses. You can't see anything. You take them off. What's next?
What's next? I was just kind of scanning the woods that were in front of me, and I think I noticed a change in the landscape, and I couldn't really tell what it was. I wanted to say it was a deer, but I didn't know if it was my mind playing tricks on me. So I spent about 5 minutes trying to convince myself what I was really looking at, and I finally just gave up and said, screw this. I'm gonna throw the glasses back on and see what's out there. Fumbled around, threw my glasses back on, and then what I was looking at once I threw them back on was a deer staring me right in the eyes. And I immediately said, deer. And I guess where I was oriented, I had like a little window between some trees where Jason wasn't really able to see what I was looking at because he was sitting kind of behind me and to the right. So he was looking at a pile of woods, and then I was looking through this window at this deer. And what proceeded was probably a staring contest that seemed to have lasted an eternity. And I became overcome with just a roller coaster of different emotions, from being nervous to being excited to being cold as heck. And I, couldn't really control myself, and I just started shaking. Had the fear of failure in my mind, fear that I would have gotten busted and spooked off the deer. At one point, I think the deer put its head down, and I became a little more comfortable, thinking, all right, I think we're okay. But only to have her pop her head back up and continue to stare right into my eyes. And I think at one point I told Jason, I think she's staring into my soul, man. Like, this is crazy.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And so what happened?
That proceeded. Yep. So that proceeded to happen for about 20 minutes.
Oh, man.
She shifted off to the right to where what seemed to be my shooting lane. And I took that as an opportunity to maybe get in position. Right when I did that, I guess what we didn't notice was that there was deer off to our left. So when I shifted, I had spooked some deer off to our left. And we heard the deer kind of bust out of there and started, I think blowing at us.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I waited to have the other doe that was, in front of me pop up into my shooting lane, I think ended up walking off. So although we didn't get a shot at, the deer that was in front of us, it was still just a crazy set of events that occurred, and a set of emotions that I never really experienced before. Right. Just an adrenaline rush that I can't really explain very well.
And you were telling us that night, you've done all these other things that have given you like a rush of excitement. Like, I don't remember what your examples were, but you've done a roller coaster ride, you've done this thing, you've done that thing, and nothing else was this type of feeling, right?
Definitely. Yeah. Like I've been out west snowboarding. I've been, a decent amount of mountain biking. I've caught a ton of fish, but what I felt that night was I can't compare it to anything else.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. That's just hearing, like, when you came back and shared that story with us, that was, one of the highlights for me, just hearing about the excitement that you had. And that night ended up being doubly exciting, because we had some interesting things going on, me and Mike, on our hunt. So we had several interesting things happen. First off, Mike and I went and head back to the same chunk of ground we hunted in the morning, only to find 2 trucks parked in the parking lot there. So I'm thinking, well, you know what? We passed by another little spot that didn't have any trucks in the parking lot, and I looked at the map as we were driving. I was like, ooh, I like that too. So that was kind of in the back of my head already. So when we got to the parking lot and saw 2 other people, I thought, you know what? Let's just turn back and go to this other spot. So we go to this other spot, park, we get all set, we start hiking in, and there was a crop field up front, and then a bunch of nasty swamp behind it with a couple little pockets of islands and high ground out in that swamp. And I thought there was a couple of regions that we'd be able to sneak way back in there and get in between where deer might come off of those islands where they'd be bedded coming towards that crop field. And Mike, you got tall boots, or did you have boots by then? No, you were still rocking the hikers, I guess.
Yeah.
So we had hikers, but I thought we could get in there, and we're walking down the field edge, and there's a lot of sign. Like, I mean, there was a whole bunch of tracks, weren't there? I mean, quite a lot of sign. So I was feeling good about that. There were definitely deer feeding in this field, probably after dark, I figured. But if we got in the right intercept zone, we catch these does coming out. So we get to the point where I want to cut into the woods, get to kind of the inside corner of this field. And I'm looking at my phone to look at the map, and I'm looking at the ground. I look at my phone, look at the ground, and I look up, and there's another hunter sitting in a tree right in front of us, just like waving. I'm like, crap. I don't know what you were thinking at that point. We'd 2 hunters in one place. Now there's another guy. What were you thinking at this point?
Well, we saw hunters everywhere, so I wasn't really surprised. I'm thinking, all right, well, it's just another opportunity to see where else we can fit in. So, I mean, from my perspective, wanting some technical learning, I got a lot of good options of where to go.
Yeah, I guess you learned how the necessity of being able to adapt. We had to adapt to a lot of stuff.
A lot of changing.
Yeah, a lot of changing. So then I slipped back to where we'd seen most of the tracks come into the field, because I liked that area too, and I could see in the map that there was a cluster of high pieces in the swamp with these oak trees out there. So I thought there's probably deer bedded out there as well. So we slipped into the swamp, worked our way towards those, and got set up in another zone, sat there for maybe 45 minutes or an hour, and then we heard a cough. Do you remember that? Do you remember the cough?
Yeah.
Because I turned to you, I hear the cough, I'm like, ooh, that's a deer. That sounded like a deer cough, because deer cough just like that. But then in the back of my mind, I'm like, or it's a hunter. Let's hope it's not a hunter. and then, I don't know, another 15 minutes later, something like that, I kept thinking about it. And I was like, you know what? I better just take a peek. So I got around the corner, and I don't know, I walked like 5 yards, and then there's another guy sitting on the ground like 50 yards away from us. So that was frustrating. So I was like, all right, we got to move again. And so now I decided to move further into the swamp, but got upwind of that guy and try to kind of cut the distance between those 2 hunters and try to find some zone where there might be deer moving that weren't impacted by these other people. And we just slipped along the side of this island, getting closer and closer to like a really wet cattail part of the swamp. And I found a spot where several trails all came together. You could see 2 different edges of habitat types, and it seemed like probably the best we could get. And it was down to the last hour or less of daylight at that point. So figured this is the best chance we could have, and we settled down. So tell me this though, Mike, before we get to the end of that hunt, one of your big goals for this experience, it seemed from our conversation and from what you've said here, one of those things that you really just wanted, like that next level of knowledge. Like, how do I do this on my own? How do I actually make sense of what I'm seeing? So you can go out there and do this without, the family saying, "Oh, sit in that bucket." Do you feel like, tell us about what you learned? Tell us about if any of that stuff was helpful that I was saying and sharing with you. Did you come away from this experience with some new ideas and ways to look at it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of the tools that I think is really cool, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this because I think they're your sponsor, is the Onyx map. That thing is really awesome to get that kind of high-level overview of looking at it. And, I could say firsthand that as we moved around out there, that map was out all the time, and it was really helpful to keep track of where we were and where we were going. And you showed me a number of different times, like the things that you were looking for on the map. And that was really cool to see, not only from the map, but then to see it also in real life and to connect the theory to the real life action and how that worked. Looking for those edges of different types of habitat, looking for the feeding ground versus the bedding ground, and kind of keeping in mind the direction of the wind while trying to get in between those different areas. One thing that was really interesting to me that I'd never heard before really is sitting in different areas if it's the morning versus if it's the nighttime.
Oh, yeah.
Whether they're moving from bedding habitat to feeding habitat or the reverse, and how you need to adjust your entrance and exit based upon that. And so all of those things to me were really interesting, and we did them firsthand. So, I think that's the kicker. It's one thing to hear about it or listen to it or think about it. It's another thing to be doing it. So at this point, I feel like I can absolutely go find a piece of wood that I've never been to before and at least get a good starting point.
Man, you sound like a pro, Mike. I got to tell you, whoever taught you really knows what they're doing.
Yeah, they do.
I think it was probably the training, though, that he had before this weekend that probably did it.
Well, Furter helped out there too, probably. So okay, I'm very glad to hear that stuff stuck and that it made sense. Especially, it's a great point to think about the fact that these concepts are interesting in theory and interesting to hear about, but it's really hard for it to hit home until you're actually in the field and can confirm all those things.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land? Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Okay, so we moved to the new spot. How about you walk me through then how the hunt ended?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're sitting in this final spot. I think that was our fourth spot for the day, something like for the evening hunt.
Just for the night.
Had quite a few spots that night. Yep, and we sat down there, and it was pretty thick area, lots of tall grass, and so there's not a whole lot of line of sight going on. And we sat there for that last hour or so, and just as it was starting to get dark, we could hear the crunching. And that was the moment where Mark said, "You hear that? That's either a deer or a hunter." So we kind of just sat there and we perked up, and you get ready. You get into that. For me, it's like you get into that kill mode. Where you try to be deadly quiet and just really sit still and really listen hard. And it was so amazing. You can almost feel the sticks crunch when it's moving. And we could tell it was really, really close. And you could see it. Mark could see it from where he was sitting, but I couldn't see it. I never even did see it the whole time. And it was so exciting, but it was that last, 8 to 10 minutes before the end of shooting light, and I couldn't see it at all. And then unfortunately it was just too dark and there was nothing we could do about it.
Yeah.
But you know what? Sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. For me, even that experience, just being so close and just, it's such a multi-sensory experience. It's just really amazing to commune with nature in that level.
Yeah, it was really exciting for me. I mean, I was pumped. Like you said, we could hear a deer approaching, and as you mentioned, very tall, swampy grass. So I just slowly stood up out of my seat to try to see over these grasses. And as I stood up, I could just see antlers. And it was a buck walking down this trail right to us. And the way it was set up is we were positioned with a trail running across right barely in front of us. And then there was a trail that was running perpendicular to that on our left, and then there were some trails perpendicular crossing to our right. And this deer was coming from the left side, coming right at us. And all he had to do was keep walking, and he'd cross the path that was across in front of us, and you could shoot straight down that to this deer. And so when I stood up and saw him, I saw this buck walking right down the path, and he was only by the time he stopped, he was probably 3 steps away from getting into that. And I was just like, he's right here. He's going to step right into that lane. Get ready. Get ready. And then, he stopped and froze up, whether he heard me whispering because I was so excited, or the wind had died down. At that point, there was no wind. So our wind might have settled or swirled. He might have caught our scent. Any number of things might have happened, but he froze up and just didn't move. And I am looking at my phone and seeing how much time is left with shooting light. And I'm thinking, oh man, we're down to 4 minutes, down to 3 minutes, down to whatever it was. It was right at the end. I was like, you know what? I just got to throw a Hail Mary. So I tried just a little contact grunt. I pulled up my grunt tube just to give a little, just on the off chance, in the last minute, he might take 2 more steps because he was curious, what the heck was that? And that didn't work. He didn't move for another minute, and then he bounded off and, I don't know, bounced 10 yards away, and then kept walking again. And it was after shooting hours, but, it was exciting.
And he was really close, right? How far would you say?
Oh, yeah. Less than 10 yards. He was right.
I mean, the ground was super wet. And so you could literally hear those hoofs going in the mud, squishing in the mud. I mean, it was that close. It was very cool.
Yeah, it was fun for me. What was really kind of especially cool, or at least on my side personally, was that I hunt so much and I've seen so many deer that sometimes, and I hate to say this, but sometimes I take it for granted, seeing a buck or seeing a doe. because I've been very fortunate to have many of these encounters. But being in this position with someone who's a newer hunter who hasn't killed a deer with a bow before like this, and who I know so badly wants to get this opportunity, it made me so excited to have a 1.5-year-old buck walking in. I mean, I was just as excited about as when I killed my first deer. So from the mentor side, like, that's a really fun thing too. It brings new joy to things that you've done in the past, but you're doing it in a new way. And that was pretty cool. So that takes us to the end of night number 1. No one killed a deer. A few other people saw a few, but tough sledding again. The next morning we go out. You, me, and Mike, man, we put in the work. We hiked in more than a mile for every hunt.
Yep.
But we did not see anything the next morning. Dan, you have a story for the last morning. You and Jason found a little honey hole, didn't you?
Yeah, we sure did. Definitely.
What happened?
Definitely. So we went back to the same spot. Figured we'd set up in the same location, and got in pretty early, maybe an hour and a half before legal shooting hours, and kind of waited it out. I think probably around 8 a.m. Just kind of doing my normal scan. Look to my left, and I see what looks like a buck staring right at me. So once again, kind of that whole slew of emotions kind of overcame me. But this time I kind of knew it, it's showtime now. So I gotta make sure that I'm cool and I do everything right here to potentially have an opportunity to get a shot off. Luckily, Jason spotted it as well this time. He gave me a range. He said it was about 25 yards out. And I said, all right, cool. But what I needed the buck to do was maybe take one step out behind this tree to get my shooting lane, and I would have had a perfect broadside shot at him. So I stayed put. Being that the deer kind of saw me, I think he was pretty curious as to what was kind of moving around out there. He ended up turning away, actually, for a quick second, and Jason brought his grunt tube and gave out a grunt, and the deer came right back to the same spot, put his head down, and I took that opportunity to pull my bow back at full draw. So I was ready to go. Deer picked his head back up, and I was looking at this thing through my peephole, just ready to let it loose once he took that extra step. Unfortunately, the deer did exactly the opposite of what we wanted him to do, took a step back and ran off. But what seemed to be, like what felt like 5 minutes, that 30 seconds of what went down was just absolutely incredible. It was so exciting for me to be able to just use what kind of I've been taught and what Jason was letting me know what to do, and calm my emotions and get myself ready mentally was just so cool. And then also to have my bow out there and be at full draw at a buck was so cool. It was an amazing experience.
How do you feel like you handled the emotions compared to the night before? Was it a similar rush and shaking, or were you able to, you knew what to expect and it wasn't quite the same, or what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had it at first, and I felt that rush of emotions coming, but, I put myself in check and just said it's game time and let's go. But once the deer ran off, it was weird. It was like those same emotions came rushing right back, and I started shaking again after, the deer had ran off. Yeah. But, I put myself in a position where I knew what to do, got the opportunity to pull my bow back, and I was just ready to go. I was, put in that position to succeed, and Jason did everything that he could. Fortunately, it didn't work out our way, but it was still just to have that and be so close was just so cool to be out there.
Yeah, that must have been very, very exciting. And like we were saying yesterday, the first time I drew back on a buck, I knocked my arrow off the rest and the deer ran away. The second time I drew back on a buck, I drew back and was so out of my mind that I released without fully aiming and I hit a tree. So you handled it much better than I did. So nobody ended up shooting a deer, but at least most of the hunters saw some. Most everyone had a little bit of an encounter. So what I'm curious about now is what things do you still see as challenges or areas where you still wish you had more help? Dan, do you think that you are armed now to go out into the field and hunt on your own? Or are there still some obstacles you're like, gosh, I wish I could still get help with this, or I hope someone could come help me with this other thing? Or what about that?
No, yeah. I definitely feel inspired to get out there on my own. I definitely feel confident enough to at least make the initiative to go out. I think what I would be a little unsure about is making sure that the spot I'm setting up at and the strategy that I have in mind, considering everything that we talked about this weekend, is robust. Making sure that I'm playing the wind correctly, making sure that I'm picking a spot where I think deer are bedded and would probably go out and feed. I think I might need to run that by somebody to say, okay, this is what I'm working with, and this is what I'm thinking my strategy is. What does it sound like to you? So I think that would probably be the biggest thing for me. But I'm definitely sold on taking on the challenge. I think that's what I like about it most is there's so much, there's so many different layers of complexity in the different aspects of hunting that I think it's super, super cool to maybe take on and try to figure those things out. I think that's what's so attractive about the whole sport to begin with.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that. What about you, Mike? What are there any things that are still holding you back, or do you feel armed and inspired to try it on your own? Like, where's your head at?
Well, I definitely feel like I'm ready. I'm prepared to get out there and try it on my own as far as like finding a location and picking, how I'm going to go about it. I definitely agree with Dan. It would be great to have that kind of soundboard where you can toss some ideas back and get some feedback. Now the thing that I'm thinking about next is like, okay, once I found my spot, once I pick out kind of a game plan, I think there's some more learning that maybe isn't necessary to get started, but things that I want to learn. Like, when we were out, you pulled out your grunt to try to get that buck to come in just a few more steps. Jason's using his grunt kind of for the same thing to get him to move a little bit. It's those type of things now that I'm looking to learn a little bit more about. We all know you can pop into a hunting and shooting store and you can find thousands of calls and trinkets and scent this and, spray that. I mean, there's so many different things out there, but just that kind of next level knowledge about, what are the fundamental toolkit, I guess, that you need just to make those next level decisions.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, that's good to hear. Like, I'm glad that you guys both feel like you at least have a starting point. And like I talked about with both of you, and I think many of the other mentors did as well, it's our goal as part of this program not to just have a weekend with you, but to have like a long-term connection. And so, you got my phone number now. If you want to pull up Onyx and mark a waypoint and say, hey, I'm thinking about hunting here, share that with me. Ask me what I think. Like, I'm here for you. I can talk you through like, hey, I think there might be deer in this spot, and just make sure you access it from the west. Like, those kinds of conversations are so much fun for me and for most other hunters. Like, we love geeking out about the strategy. So I think that's probably the coolest thing. And you guys both alluded to this, having that sounding board, having that connection now who can help you think through these things.
Right.
So I said it before, I'll say it again. Please utilize me in that kind of way. Josh too. And I know all the other people we met, many of them probably said the same things.
And Mark, that's really the only way this program succeeds. Dan, you're no different than anybody else going through the program. We're saying, hey, I feel like inspired to get out there, but there's still so many different aspects of it. To do it all on your own is daunting. you've got to have that mentor follow up and that relationship where you can still get help because you're going to need it. So that's why we try to pair mentors with people that are at least somewhat close to them, where they could come out and hunt with you or whatever. So that's really the only way this type of program succeeds, is if you have that mentor follow up and continuing on that relationship.
Yeah. How did it work out for you, Josh? Did you have a good mentor some number of years ago?
That's funny that you asked, because I actually wanted to ask Mike how it was being mentored by you, because we've both now kind of had you as a mentor, and I'd be interested to. For some reason, I feel like Mike's experience is probably much different than my experience. So
maybe I was nicer
Mike,
to him.
Yeah, probably way nicer. So I wanted to know, Mike, what was like Mark's like blood pressure doing when you kept running into people out there? Like, could you just kind of like see like steam starting to come out of his ears, or kind of what was his makeup as you guys kept running into people? I can only imagine how it was, but I'd like to hear it.
I mean, honest to God, he was pretty calm and collective. He didn't really get that fired up. A couple of times he's like, "Oh man, there's still more people," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's okay. We'll just go find another spot. Like, no big deal." Well, he was pretty calm about it.
Wow. I don't know, something's happened with Mark, I think, this year. I don't know what's going on.
Am I calming down?
Fatherhood, that's what it is.
Right?
It might be.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Did he yell at you and stuff when that deer was coming? He was like, "Don't move!" Like shoot! Like, what was like that going? Like, what was his directions like when that deer was coming?
No. I mean, he didn't yell at me at all, not even once. Wow. Before we went out, he took the time to ask me kind of like, what are my goals? What am I here to learn? Why am I here? And he addressed those things really head on. I mean, the whole time I told him I was looking to learn technical stuff, and he just kind of spewed information for the rest of the trip. So it was great. He really did exactly what I asked him to do. So it was a great experience,
man.
And no yelling.
Wow, that's great. I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear you had a good positive experience.
It sounds like, Josh, maybe you're the problem.
Or maybe I was just too sensitive.
No, I will say though, I remember when that buck was coming in, I was like not yelling, but I was like forcefully whispering to try to make sure he heard me. I'm like, "He's right here. Get ready. He's right here." I was pretty excited.
Oh man.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good time, and I'm glad that you guys had a positive experience. And I think the final thing I just want to run through is for you, Josh. For those people listening, just once again, and I've tried to share this a lot of places, but can you just run down one more time how people can get involved with this, whether they want to be a mentor and help folks out and volunteer, or whether they want to be a mentee and want to get help with this program? How can people do that?
Yeah, no, for sure. So we've got a landing page on QDMA's website that's basically everything Field to Fork. Any of the podcasts like this one that we've done about Field to Fork is housed there. We've got the video or the film that we just launched on Field to Fork a few weeks back. That's on there. It's got a bunch of the articles that have been written about the Field to Fork program. So if you just go to QDMA.com, I believe it's /Field to Fork, it takes you right to that. From a national standpoint, if you'd like to get in touch with someone at QDMA, whether you're a new hunter or someone who wants to mentor, reach out to Hank Forrester. hforrester@qdma.com is his email. Mark, I'm sure you could probably put that on your show notes or something like that.
Yep.
And then if you're in Michigan or Indiana or like Western Ohio, definitely feel free to reach out to me. I can get you pointed in the right direction, hopefully. Or really, if you're anywhere, you can reach out to me, and I can get you where you need to be. And my email is jhilliard@qdma.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, I can't highly recommend enough for those of you that do hunt, for those of you out there listening to the podcast that love to get out in the woods and love to be out in nature and learn about deer and hunt deer and feed your families and feed your friends. If you've had that privilege and that experience, you owe it and I don't mean to be preachy here, but you owe it to everyone else to give it back a little bit and to make sure that other people get to experience that joy and that powerful connection too. Simply put, it's too awesome of a thing that we have to not share with people. So I can tell you that. Go ahead, Josh.
No, and I was just going to say, and it doesn't have to be a program like this to get someone new out there, right? I mean, if you know a friend or a family member or a neighbor, just take them out with you. It doesn't have to be like a formal program like this. I mean, these are a lot of fun. They're great, but to really move the needle, it's got to be hunters that are just willing to take somebody out with them. So even if it's not through a program like this, just take someone with you, even if they just sit with you to experience it.
Yeah.
It can definitely make a difference.
Very true. And what about final thoughts from you guys? Mike, how about you? If you were to be able to, let's say there's an auditorium full of people that you're standing in front of, and they're all folks like you guys. Either they've never hunted before, or maybe they had a little bit of hunting experience in the past, but they fell away from it, and now they're considering trying to get back into it again. If you had that group of people in front of you, what would you tell them right now about trying hunting again, or about this program, or anything that you learned over the weekend?
Well, I just think that it's such a powerful experience. And for me, it's about so much more than just the deer, just the kill. It's really, it's the whole experience. Like, when do you get an opportunity to go sit in the woods? Like I was telling you, after our first hunt, one of the times that I like the most is after that first 45 minutes or so, when the rest of nature forgets that you're there and everything comes back to life, and all of a sudden the squirrels are out and the chipmunks are out and the birds. We had a great experience with a red-tailed hawk.
Yeah.
We found a bunch of really awesome mushrooms out there.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, I'm a chef, so I geek out about the forage. And, we talked about the fact that you can eat cattails and like all kinds of stuff. And so for me, it's that whole nature experience. It's like going to church, man. You get a time to sit there with your thoughts and to be a smaller part of a bigger world. And hopefully you get the opportunity to experience the kill and the stalking of a beautiful animal. So, I mean, it's really something that everybody should take. You just get out there and try it. You just have to try it.
Yeah.
It's a great, great experience.
And what about you, Dan? What would you tell to that auditorium?
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar to what Mike said. I mean, just being out there, it was just such a great way to disconnect from all the other pressures and things going on in your day-to-day life, and just turning off and focusing on, what's going on around you out in the field. It's just such a fun experience, whether you see deer or not, just to take a step out and find some land, maybe find some friends with like-minded interests, and head out there and just enjoy the resources that you have right in front of you. And, I definitely have a lot of respect for what, you guys are doing with this program. I mean, it's bigger than just teaching people how to hunt, right? I mean, I know, Mark, you've talked about how the number of hunters are on the decline, and getting people out there and introducing them to the sport is, there's a longer term goal with all this. It's going to help protect, our wildlife resources, the money that's spent towards, different management of habitat. It's bigger than just taking us out. It's ensuring the future of what we have, and making sure that, tomorrow is protected. So, it's a great program, and it's, definitely a lot of respect for what, these programs are doing, and any mentor that goes out and helps get new people involved in the sport. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I couldn't have said it better. You guys have got it nailed. I might need to hire you to be spokespeople for this.
Yeah. You guys are listening.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Yep. Let me know.
Well, this is great. I appreciate you guys coming out and taking a leap and trying something new and getting out of your comfort zone and, joining us for this experience. It was so much fun, I think, for everyone, and I'm excited and reinvigorated to keep at it and hopefully share this kind of thing with more people. So I will leave you guys with one piece of homework. just one to-do list, and that is that you both need to go out and hunt again, and you both need to either call me or text me beforehand and after to talk about what you're going to try to do and how it went, so we can have some strategy debrief sessions. Selfishly, that's probably my favorite thing during hunting season, and maybe it'll help you guys a little too. So can you do that?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Perfect.
Hey,
All right.
Mark, can I just say one more thing here before we wrap up?
You sure can.
I just want to give a big shout out and a thank you to all the mentees that did come out, the new hunters that came out for this weekend. And I also did one last weekend in the Lansing area. So between the 2 weekends, we had 16 new hunters out in the woods. So a huge thank you to all of these new hunters that signed up and actually showed up to do it. And another big thank you and shout out to all the mentors who came out. I mean, we can't do these types of programs without dedicated volunteers and people really taking the time out of their own hunting schedule to come out and help out with these types of programs. And, we had 16 mentors for each weekend. So we had a couple even double up that did both weekends. So a huge thank you to all those guys and gals that took time out of their schedules. I'm sure they're busy and wanted to give back to a program like this. So thank you to all of you who went through this program. It was awesome putting both of these on, and it's a lot of work, but man, it is well worth it.
And I guess I should say well done to you too, Furter. That's a lot of work. So good job organizing it. It turned out great. You did a dang good job. And I think on that note, we will wrap it up. So good luck, Mike. Good luck, Dan. And let's stay in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks. It was an honor.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having us.
And that's going to do it, folks. Thank you for listening. I hope this gave you just a little bit more information or a little bit more of a kick in the behind to introduce new folks to this wonderful thing that we get to do, which is hunting. And hopefully those tips at the front end on hunting the pre-rut were helpful as well. I'm excited for you guys. I'm excited for my own hunts. Next time we chat, I'll be back from the Boundary Waters with an update. Hopefully there's some stories to share there. And the rut will basically be upon us. So holy smokes. Hope you're ready. Hold on to your seats. So until next time, good luck hunting and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.